Welcome to the Dynasty Nerds Fantasy Football Podcast, where we discuss Dynasty strategy, rankings, and all things NFL. So get ready to geek out on fantasy football with your host, Rich Dotson.
Welcome back into the Dynasty Nerds Podcast. I'm your host, Garret Price, here with my co-host, Matt O'Hara.
Hey, what's happening, Garret?
Not too much. We are getting into a show without our fearless leader, Rich Dotson. He is tanning the toes once again, and he will be back next week, but I will not be back next week. I will be gone, so it'll just be the two of you guys next week.
And it's going to probably go thoroughly off the rails like it usually does when you're not there to keep us in line. So everyone look forward to that.
Kicking it old school.
Exactly.
Kicking it old school. It'll be great. Yeah, if you're an OG listener, you're like, oh man, it'll be like the good old days. Yep. But not so fast. This week, you're still stuck with me, and we are going into deep dives. We are looking at guys with a real low ADP and saying, maybe there is something there. Maybe this player isn't just a lost cause. And we see this happen every year where there's a random player, whether it be a rookie, a veteran, that comes out of relative obscurity and becomes a household name for fantasy football purposes. So, Matt, we're going to do our best. We're going to give it our best attempt to identify some of those potential guys this week. You feel pretty good about that?
I mean, I feel good that I have some guys that have some potential. We'll see if they hit or not. I mean, these ones are always so tricky, right? I mean,
for sure.
But I do feel like there's at least some sound reasoning behind some of these guys. So yeah, let's give it a shot, right?
Right. I mean, if you were to take guys with an ADP of under, you can pick an arbitrary number, 150, 180, whatever.
Sure.
If you were to take those guys and you hit 10% of the time, you're thrilled.
Oh yeah. I mean, because you're not having to give up much for these guys in trade or anything like that. And if you're taking them in startups, they are just end of the draft, like shot in the dark type of guys. So it's nice to know the names. It's nice to have a reason, and it gives you something to root for as well, and kind of follow along. It's always nice to have a deep stash where you're just hoping and praying like something's going to happen and something's going to hit. This person's going to go from having no value to being a valuable piece that you can either trade or use on your team.
And what we're trying to do is we're trying to give you guys that have a 10% chance versus the normal 2 to 3% chance that you're normally getting on these guys. So yes, it's still incremental, but we're trying to give you the best possible odds you can have to hit on these late round deep dives. So Matt, give us your first guy.
All right, so my first guy is Melton, wide receiver for the Green Bay Packers. He's 25 years old. He currently doesn't even have an ADP number in our ADP, so I don't even have kind of a value to bounce off of here. But he was a 7th round draft pick of the Seattle Seahawks back in 2022. He ended up finding his way onto the Packers practice squad, and eventually at the end of last year, he actually did make some regular season appearances. I think he was active or whatnot for 5 games, but he only had stats in 4. And in those 4 games, he was actually able to amass some pretty halfway decent stats. He had 16 receptions, 218 yards, and a touchdown, with his best performance coming in week 7 of last year, or week 17 of last year, where he had 6 receptions, 105 yards, and 1 touchdown, and he was able to finish as wide receiver 6. So, I don't even think a lot of people know the name. I wasn't even all that familiar. He might have been one of those guys that, you kind of pump and dump some of this stuff when you're going through these prospect things in 2022, especially some of the later round guys. You kind of get through them pretty quick, and then you forget them pretty quick. And Melton definitely fell into that category for me. But as a little refresher, he's 5'11", 189 pounds. He ran a 4.34 40, coming out of the draft. So he is fast. He has a nice 10-yard split at 1.5 flat, which is very, very good and would compare to a lot of the good wide receivers coming out this year. 38-inch vertical jump, 10.1 broad jump, 6.98 in the three cones. So this guy has got some good movement skills, right? And I think he does offer a little something that some of the other bigger guys, taller guys there in Green Bay kind of don't. And that's some stop-start, but also it's just some straight vertical speed, right? So Bo Melton, obviously the biggest hurdle for him is going to be climbing that depth chart. There are just so many guys there, and they spread the ball around really well. But I think the thing going for him is the fact that he did perform when given the opportunity, and especially late in the season. So that kind of leaves a good, I think, mark on the coaching staff going into the offseason. So if he can put together a nice beginning to this offseason, he may get some cracks at the wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, but I would expect this to be something that kind of materializes in the next year or two. I wouldn't expect great things out of him this year, but if you see more flashes and more big games just kind of out of the blue from him, then you get a little bit more excited, and you can feel a little bit better about either obtaining this guy and stashing him, or just kind of having him as a roster on your roster and having him as more than just kind of a clogger. Maybe he's a guy that in a year or so can kind of come out and do a little more as he gets a better opportunity.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that helps Bo Melton is, even though it is a really good wide receiver core, it's a very wide open wide receiver core, whereas nothing is truly established there. Obviously, Jaden Reed and Christian Watson have the best shot at becoming the main pieces of this offense with their draft capital and performance in their rookie or second year. But there's a lot of other guys that are really interesting, but we just don't know how it's all going to play out. So if you want to just give me basically every Green Bay Packer wide receiver at their current ADP, I'm probably interested, because I know that there'll be 2 or 3 guys that pan out. Which 2 or 3? I don't really know, but give me as many shots at that wide receiver core as I can get, and I'm interested.
And Garrett, that's kind of why I went right to the bottom, right? I mean, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, all these Christian Watson, all these other guys, Dontavius Wicks, even Wicks, all those guys I think have a bigger name out there. And Wicks is an interesting guy, but to me, it goes back, and I watched him drop some passes, and that was the reason why I didn't really like him coming out of college and into the NFL, was because of that issue. And it doesn't look like he's really gotten that solved. Bo Melton didn't drop any passes. Obviously, he had the fewest opportunities out of any of those guys.
Sure.
But still, to have no drops is still a good sign. It's better than if he had very few opportunities and he had a drop on his record. So, we'll see how this year goes. We'll see if he's able to maintain that and become a reliable target and not drop passes. And if a guy like Dontavius Wicks or Romeo Doubs, who had, I think, 3 total drops as well. So it was 3 for Doubs and 2 for Wicks. And 2 for, there's a guy called Malik Hicks or Heath as well that was on the roster, had a couple drops also. So to be one of the guys that's standing there, it was him and Christian Watson that had no drops, I think is a good sign. Another kind of feather in his cap. I mean, we will see on any of these guys, like you said, but I personally feel like he's so cheap. He would be the one that I'd be targeting, because you could get him possibly on the waiver wire, and if not, as just a throw-in piece on any other trade. You wouldn't have to necessarily target him specifically in a trade.
Yeah, anytime you target a deep dive guy, everyone's always like, what do you know?
The price goes up.
Yeah. Why do you randomly want to trade me a 4th for this guy? It gets suspicious. But if you're like, just throw this guy on top, then no one says a word. Yeah. But yeah, when you like target them, that's when people get a little suspicious. Even me, when I see somebody like what camp news did I miss? What, like, you know,
I better do some research
kind of
before I hit send, or before I okay this and send this trade through.
Hey, Nerd Herd, this is Rich Dotson. I've got some exciting news for you. Underdog Fantasy is back with their annual Best Ball Mania tournament. And this year, it's bigger and better than ever with a whopping $15 million prize pool. Best Ball Mania 5 is the ultimate fantasy football competition where you draft your team and then sit back and relax. No trades, no waivers, just your best lineup every week automatically set by Underdog. For just $25, you can enter for a shot at the grand prize of $1.5 million. Plus, there are tons of other prizes throughout the season, including $500,000 for the top regular season performer. And guess what? We've got a special offer just for our listeners. Use the promo code NERDS when you sign up, and Underdog will match your first deposit 100% up to $100. That's right. Double your money to get more entries and more chances to win. Don't miss out. Drafts are happening now, and entries close before the first game of the season. Head over to UnderdogFantasy.com or download the Underdog app, sign up with the promo code NERDS, and start your journey to fantasy football glory today. Must be 18 plus, 19 plus in Alabama and Nebraska, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. The terms do apply. Concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP. In New York, call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY. In Tennessee, call 1-800-889-9789.
All right. I'm going to go to the wide receiver position as well. I have some other guys that are not at the wide receiver position because typically I don't love deep dive wide receivers personally. However, we just recently did a show where talking about in their rookie campaign, if guys hit the 500-yard mark, you at least have a shot at them being a fantasy relevant wide receiver, which means they have at least 2 seasons of wide receiver 2 production or better. And this guy hit that mark as a rookie, despite being a late round pick, still with an ADP of 183. So very, very low in your startups, not a difficult trade target. And that's Demario, AKA Pop Douglas, guy for the New England Patriots. Like I said, 6th round draft capital. So nothing to be too excited about there, but the speed that this kid moves with is exciting. The things that he can do in the open field are truly exciting. And him eclipsing that 500-yard mark as a rookie tells me that, sure, still a 6th round guy, still a true shot in the dark. But that's what this show is. It's shot in the dark guys who could potentially come out of nowhere and be the player that all of a sudden is fantasy relevant for you. And when you look at this New England roster, it's exactly like Green Bay, just worse. Like there's nothing established at all. Kendrick Bourne you have as a veteran. He'll be involved to some extent. Jalen Polk got the 2nd round draft capital, so you assume he's going to be pretty involved, but it was a little bit of a surprise pick for some people that he went that high, and by some people I mean me. I was a little surprised. I thought he was more of a 3rd, 4th round pick. So for him to go in the 2nd was a little surprising for me. And then they have Javon Baker, who I think is just as good as Jalen Polk, but he went in the 4th. But none of those players necessarily inspire confidence for me. I think they're all players that have some upside. And now that they're paired with a much better quarterback prospect in Drake May, I find it interesting. I find it compelling, and it's a new coaching staff. Who knows how everything's going to play out, but somebody's going to become the featured guy here. And similar to Green Bay, because the ADPs on all of these players are just so cheap, I'll take them all. I will. I'll take them all at the, okay, I'll give a 3rd round pick for this guy. I'll give a 5th round pick for this guy. I'll give, whatever. I'll give really, really cheap draft picks to get these guys, and one of them will develop into a player that is all of a sudden pretty interesting. So for me, I am going to go with Demario Pop Douglas as my first deep dive.
All right, so that's all good stuff. He also ended up last year leading his team in targets with 78 to go along with that 561 yards receiving. Obviously it wouldn't take much to get an uptick in the touchdowns, right? Considering he got 0. So, I mean, these are all good things.
Chance.
These are all good signs. You know, I mean, he crossed that threshold of the 500 yards, like you had mentioned. And the fact that he hasn't scored touchdowns might actually help you a little bit if you're trying to acquire this guy, right? Because now his price is a little bit lower because his fantasy points last year, the output is a little bit lower. And like you mentioned, this is a wide open competition here for targets. But I feel like Demario Douglas did enough last year that, you know, even with all the hype surrounding Jalen Polk, you know, potentially being the number one guy and all that stuff going into the season, I think Douglas is going to be that starting slot wide receiver. I think it makes sense for his body type, the way he plays. And, you know, those could end up being the type of players that a young quarterback relies on quite a bit, them and the tight end, because they're close to the line of scrimmage. They're nice check down options. And it's a way to get the ball out of your hand quickly. And in the NFL, it is really, you know, when you're a rookie, you get challenged quite a bit and you get blitzed quite a bit. And that's why those guys, the slot guys and the tight ends are your best friend, because they're going to be close to the line of scrimmage. You get the ball out of your hands and they're there for you. So I like Douglas as a player, and I like Douglas as a deep stash because he's getting no run right now. Everyone's talking about the two, not just Jalen Polk, also Javon Baker, the two rookie, you know, wide receivers that they have. Kendrick Bourne's not going to go away, but I think we all know what Kendrick Bourne is. He's a good player. He's not a great player, and he's probably best suited as your fourth guy on a very good wide receiver core. So I think eventually that's going to be where he settles, and we'll see where Demario Douglas ends up settling as far as targets go. You know, like he could be the slot guy and still be the second guy in an offense for targets pretty easily. So that's even if Jalen Polk hits and kind of exceeds mine and your expectations, I think there's still a spot for Demario Douglas to gain value and get more than his 561 yards receiving his rookie season.
Yeah, he's just a player that wins differently than the other guys on the team. You know, I think Javon Baker is more of your traditional deep threat Z type of receiver. Polk profiles somewhat as an X. He's got that good, you know, battling for the catch, jump ball type of mentality. He does those things well, but they don't have that just absolute burner underneath that's going to make guys miss in the open field. Like, so they've typecast these young receivers very well. You know, it seems like it would all fit. Now, do they actually play to their potential? Rarely ever do they, but there's a chance. And so for me, I think he fits that role really well. And we know for fantasy football, those slot receivers can be really, really excellent pieces, even if they're not the best receiver on their team. We've seen plenty of those guys. The Hunter Renfrows have a wide receiver one season. Cole Beasley's have, you know, and I think athletically, obviously, Douglas is a much better athlete than those guys. You know, even thinking back in the day with the Browns, Hawkins, you know, he reminds me a lot of Andrew Hawkins, the you know, shifty wide receiver. He played for the Browns and Cincinnati and didn't have a long career, but made the most of it when he played. And so I could see him being a really nice gem that, you know, right now has an ADP of, what did I say, 183. And I could see him being much closer to, even if it's just 100 by this time next year. That's a huge gain on your investment. And then you can either flip him or continue to use him.
Hey guys, let me tell you about our friends at Sleeper. Guess what? Our app the mini is live on Sleeper right now. The Dynasty GM, pretty. You can use the analyzer, you can use the trade calculator, and my favorite thing is the inbox, right? Where all your trades from all your Sleeper leagues are right there. You can actually push trades through the actual Sleeper app. And right now, we couldn't be more excited to be partners with them. And right now, if you don't know, they are doing DFS. And I know how many people that play Dynasty play DFS as well. And right now, there's not a better place to play DFS than Sleeper. They're offering up to 100 times your entry, the highest payout in the whole DFS market right now. You can track your fantasy players and your sleeper picks in real time. All you got to do is choose 2 to 8 of your favorite players from pregame, live in-game, or even across different sports. Pick more or less than the predicted stats, and only on Sleeper, you can get up to 100 times your payout. You can share with your friends and get rewarded together. Make sure you use that promo code NERD so our friends know that friends sent them their way. And get your deposit match and have a good time. You'll have all your DFS, all of your fantasy leagues, and now even a Dynasty GM in one spot. It is fully operational inside Sleeper right now. And then when you're a Nerd Herd member, you get that full access to that. And remember, you also want to download the Dynasty Nerds app because they're both in there. Check it out. Check our friend Sleeper. Check out our DFS. Use that promo code NERDS.
Get your whole estate.
Yep.
I like that. I like that strategy quite a bit. All right, so moving on to my second guy. I'm going to go with Keaton Mitchell here. Right now, he currently has an ADP of 176, so he's like in the 15th roundish. 22 years old. He's coming off the board according to ADP as running back 54. He was an undrafted free agent last year out of East Carolina. And the reason for that has nothing to do with how he plays. It's his size. He was, around 180 pounds last year at 5'8", but he is fast. This guy is quick as a hiccup. When you look at his combine numbers, he had a 1.48 10-yard split. That's faster. That's faster than Xavier Worthy this past season. Just for a reference, he had a 1.49. It's not a lot faster, but it's faster.
But still.
Yeah. So, he had a 4.37 in the 40. This guy is fast. He doesn't maybe have the quite that fourth gear that Xavier Worthy has, but he's got a third gear that a lot of players don't have. And in 7 games last year, he was able to accumulate 47 rush attempts, 396 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He also had a couple of 9 receptions for 93 yards as well. And that's good for 8.4 yards per carry and 10.3 yards per reception. Those numbers are gaudy. He led the league in guys that had over 45 touches as far as yards per carry average. The second place guy, who had a little over 100 carries, Devon Achane. And when you're talked about in the same breath as Devon Achane in basically anything, that's pretty decent, right? So I think Achane had 7.8 yards per carry. So he was also able to top Achane in a couple of other categories as well. Yards created per attempt, he had 7.1 versus 5.8 for Achane. His breakaway rate was 14.9 versus 12.6. These are both according to fantasydata.com. And obviously, while everyone is hyped about Achane and talking about Achane, almost no one's talking about Keaton Mitchell and what he did this past season. And obviously, it has a lot to do with the fact that he got injured, right? So he ended up tearing his ACL on December 17th. And right now they literally just this week have put him on PUP list to start the season. So not a guy that's going to likely start the season active. It's nothing's written in stone yet. It sounds like they're, all the coaches are saying all the stuff that they normally say, which is he's ahead of schedule, blah, 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 blah. But I would expect him to start the season on the active PUP, which will make him lose the first 4 games of the season. But when you're talking about a guy that's this explosive, he had 1,700 yards in his last year in East Carolina total, with about 1,450 on the ground and the remaining 250 on through the air. He can beat you in a lot of ways. The Baltimore offense is looking for guys that are fast to kind of offset Lamar Jackson and kind of really give it a dual threat there. And he's completely different than Henry. So when he does come back, he is going to be this big old lightning bolt to Derrick Henry's thunder. So once he's back, I think his price is going to go up. Once people see him, that he's gained his explosion back, he's back to kind of his old self. Will it ever amount to him being an RB1? No. But I think this is a guy that you can have on your roster. There's going to be times you can use him when you obviously know he's going to have a larger role. Somebody gets nicked, somebody gets banged up, or if he just starts seeing more PPR use, which I think is a great key indicator. And you said it during the running back episode, the guys that get the PPR points are really the guys that have the long-term value. So while 180 pounds out of any running back is a little bit scary, I think he's got the kind of speed that Baltimore specifically wants to use in that offense. And he'll have some sort of role as long as he's able to stay healthy. And obviously, we only saw him for 7 games last season because he wasn't able to. So I think that's what kind of depresses and keeps his value down a little bit right now, and why he's going 176 overall as far as ADP.
So what I'm about to say is going to sound a little funny at first, but even though he's not the guy that I'm targeting in that backfield, I'm still super interested in him, which sounds weird because there's only so many running backs to go around. But for me, with these dart throw guys, I want to highlight either situations that I love, players that I love, or in an ideal situation, both. Like a guy that I really love and a situation that I really love. And I love the Baltimore backfield. I think there is huge opportunity back there because I don't think Derrick Henry is going to be able to play forever. It would not surprise me if this was just kind of a one and done thing, at most 2 years. I can't see a situation where it's more than 2 years for Derrick Henry at this point. I would be shocked if we see 3 more years out of Derrick Henry. So I think 2 is the absolute max we're getting. And it's a backfield that's prioritizing running the football. And they have 2 electric backs out of the backfield. Now, I personally like Rasheen Ali more than I like Keaton Mitchell. But if I have one, give me the other one as well, because I don't think either one is significantly better than the other. I don't think either one does anything drastically different than the other player does. And so I think the only difference is Ali's a little bit bigger, so maybe you would have a chance at more of a typical role than a Mitchell would. But either way, they're both home run threats on a Baltimore Ravens team that is looking for home run threats. So give me both of those players, even though, like I said, I've been one of the biggest stands for Rasheen Ali this offseason. That doesn't mean I think Keaton Mitchell couldn't end up being the guy that you want in that backfield. I just love that situation, and I think both those players are really talented. So if I have one, I probably want the other as well.
With that said, anything in the back of your head about Justice Hill, or has he kind of fallen to the side for you?
Yeah, he's kind of at the point where fantasy-wise, we've seen his ceiling. Like, he's had his opportunities. He's had his chances. There have been plenty of injuries in this backfield, and he's never taken the reins. So could he always be annoying for whoever's there? Sure. But do I have any thought that he is ever going to be legitimately fantasy relevant? No, I don't think he ever will be.
Agreed. He put up halfway decent stats last year. 4.6 yards per carry, 387 yards, but more importantly, the 28 receptions for 206 yards, and another touchdown. I think we could see that kind of stuff kind of dwindle for Justice Hill, in my opinion, and kind of shift over to guys like Keaton Mitchell and possibly Rasheen Ali as well. So just something to think about there when you're kind of looking at this holistically, the whole backfield.
Hey, Dynasty Nerds, it's time to take your Dynasty game to the next level with FFPC's Dynasty Startup Leagues. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just getting started, FFPC has a league for you, with entry fees ranging from $100 up to $5,000. Choose from a variety of formats, including Superflex, Best Ball Superflex, Triflex, 1QB, and Standard. With weekly lineups, waivers, trades, head-to-head matchups, and playoffs, FFPC's fully managed leagues provide the ultimate dynasty experience. Most importantly, the leagues are here to stay. FFPC has never had a dynasty league fold. They manage the entire commissioner experience, from buy-in management to fulfilling your orphans. FFPC is perfect place to expand your dynasty league portfolio. And here's the best part. As Dynasty Nerds As a listener, you can get $25 off any entry fee as a new member when you use the promo code NERDS. Head over to myffpc.com now to draft your team, manage your roster, and dominate your league with FFPC. That's myffpc.com. Promo code NERDS for $25 off any entry fee for new members. FFPC, where Dynasty dreams become a reality.
All right. I'm going to go to my next guy here, and I am going with Ty Chandler from the Minnesota Vikings. Ty Chandler is a guy that I liked coming out as a rookie. Didn't do much in his rookie season, didn't get many opportunities. But in year 2, he actually by the end of the year was just better than Alexander Madison and kind of took over that job. And there was some thoughts that maybe he just holds on to this job and he's the starting running back for Minnesota this year. Now, they ended up going out and getting Aaron Jones, which I think was a good move. Can't blame them at all for going out and doing that. But most of my favorite dart throws are backup running backs. And part of the reason that those are some of my favorite dart throws is typically you know when you can play them. I have a hard time figuring out when I can play my deep wide receivers because, yes, they're going to have 2 games a year where they're interesting, but trying to figure out which 2 of the 17 those are is really, really difficult to do. So I would much rather just wait on a running back because I know when the starter's injured. I know when the guy ahead of him is out. And in his opportunities last year, he actually played pretty well overall, especially towards the end of the season. He had a game. He started the last 4 games of the season last year. And he had a game against Cincinnati, 23 carries, 132 yards, and a touchdown in that game. Also contributed 3 catches for 25 yards. Several other games with 2, 3, 4 catches in them. Last game of the season for them, 12 carries, 69 yards against Detroit. So he put up solid numbers when given the opportunity to play. Do I think he is ever the guy again? Probably not. But Aaron Jones is coming off a season where he was very banged up, and he's 30 years old. He is not young at all. And so is it out of the realm of possibility to say that he's one of the more likely players to miss some time this season? I don't think that's unreasonable to say at all. And when Ty Chandler gets the opportunity, we know he's a guy that they're willing to give the full workload to, which that's half the battle there. Sometimes we have backup running backs where like, I don't know, are they going to split time with somebody else? Are they going to get the work? I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do. Whereas Ty Chandler, we know he's going to get the workload. So while this ceiling on this late round stash is capped maybe compared to some other guys, I think he's one of those players that at the right time, you can easily either start him when you're desperate at running back and you need that guy to get you running back 2 type of production, or trade him and get a guy that all of a sudden now you're getting a late second, an early third, and you're moving up in your rookie draft because of a guy like this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest point here. On a lot of these running backs, it's going to be when does he get his opportunity, right? And as far as knowing their value and all that kind of stuff, they're all great to have. Lots of them are great to have. If you see a lot of my dynasty rosters that are mature dynasty rosters and not new,
yeah,
I will have just a bunch of random running backs because if you're going to be competing, you're going to need those guys eventually. So having a guy like Ty Chandler, and I do have Ty Chandler on one of my better teams, and I feel pretty good about it. He's not going to start the season. I'm not going to, I know I'm not going to be starting him week 1, but who knows? Once those bye weeks hit, once injuries hit, he might be a great fill-in piece for 3 or 4 weeks. And, this is the type of guy that towards the end of the season, you might just get lucky and he could be the hot guy during a playoff run. And
yep.
I don't think he's a world beater, but during those playoffs, sometimes you just need a guy that's going to get you double-digit points, 10 to 15 points. And Ty Chandler could definitely be that guy for you. So I really do like him as a stash. and as a guy to have on your roster this season, especially on contenders that are going to be looking for players to kind of just man the running back position at some point during the season, because the injuries are coming. They're going to come before the season even starts, but especially once the actual hitting begins.
Yeah, and that's exactly what he was last year. He was an end of the season guy that there were playoff teams that utilized Ty Chandler in their playoff runs because they needed a body. Same thing with Zamir White last year. He's one that's kind of emerged even more so and now taken the reins to be the lead back on the team. But you never know with these guys. So if you can get young upside running backs that, second year, third year, even rookies, you never know how these things play out. And they're some of my favorite stashes to have on my teams.
No doubt about it. I mean, I guess with that in mind, I didn't do a real deep dive on this guy, so I don't have a ton of stats, but I at least want to mention one other player that I have as kind of a deep stash guy, and it's a rookie. It's Kamani Vidal of the Chargers, and obviously, Gus Edwards right now is the guy. They have J.K. Dobbins there as well. We kind of don't know what he is as far as injury histories or as far as his injuries are going. So to be able to get Vidal, who last season was a very productive guy coming out of Troy, over 1,600 yards rushing. He had over 200 yards receiving on 18 receptions and 15 total touchdowns. He's a well-built guy at about 5'8", 215 pounds, so he could carry the load if necessary there. I think he's a nice guy to kind of stash away, and if you have the other running backs on the team, it'd be nice to draft him. If your draft is already over and he has been picked, maybe go one round ahead of where he got picked and just go pluck him up and put him on your roster. Make an offer anyway to get him on your roster, because Gus Edwards, I think, is a nice back, but I'm not sure he's the answer there. And J.K. Dobbins, I can't rely on him to stay healthy, at all. I know no one else can either. So Vidal just makes a nice piece, I think, and a nice upside play for Jim Harbaugh, who we all know is going to want to run the ball. He handpicked this guy in the early part of the 6th round. I know that's not a high pick, but he passed on some of his own, Michigan players throughout the draft and ended up picking this guy in the 6th round. So I think there has to be a little something there that he likes for him to have done that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good one. And anytime you can get young running backs that at least have a path, add them to your squad. Once your draft's over, or Vidal got a little bit of hype, so he would have been more like a late 3rd, early 4th, but still, like, add those guys to your roster. You never know which ones are going to hit, and to try to say for sure that we know, we don't, but we have some key indicators that tell us this guy's got a better shot than others, and I think Vidal is one of those. And the last one I have, and similar, I didn't do a ton on him because he was a rookie, and I didn't want to highlight too many rookies, but a guy I talked about quite a bit in the offseason, and then we've been seeing some hype out of camp for this player, despite being an undrafted guy. It's Blake Watson. Blake Watson, one of only 2 guys in college football last year as a running back to get over 50 receptions. So excellent pass catcher out of the backfield. And those are like Keaton Mitchell that you just mentioned, Austin Eckler, Danny Woodhead, like those small, undersized receiving running backs, they tend to get overlooked. They tend to get passed on. They tend to go lower in drafts than they could or should. But teams are not hesitant to bring those guys in, and even with a lack of draft capital, give them opportunities to catch the football. I know everyone's all about Jaleel McLaughlin, and he's fine, but I think Blake Watson is the more talented player, and it would not shock me at all if long-term Blake Watson is the guy that is the receiving running back in Denver to be in that Sean Payton receiving running back mold that we've seen so many times out of Payton. So that's one guy that I am willing to take a little bit more of a stab at. Even as much as I love Javonte, and I think he's a fine pass catcher, we know Sean Payton is going to want a guy that is his pass catching running back, and I don't think that's going to be Javonte Williams. So if that's the case, give me Blake Watson at the very end of my bench, a guy I'm taking in the 20th round of my startup. That kind of player. And talking about ADP wise, our ADP right now, it goes to let's see who's the last player on the board. ADP goes all the way to like 240, 250. He's not on it. So he's going to be cheap or free. But Blake Watson, another one that I want to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. And for all the reasons you just said, but specifically the Sean Payton pass catching running back, he's looking for somebody. He's going to find it, whether it's, McLaughlin or Blake Watson, is yet to be determined. Yeah, we'll see. So it's going to be one of those guys. And obviously McLaughlin is going to be a lot more expensive than Watson at this point. So you might as well go out and take a shot in the dark with a guy like Watson and see if you can scrape him off the waiver wire or pick him with your last pick in, a rookie draft or something like that. I think it's all good to get those guys on your roster.
Absolutely. So that is our deep dynasty stashes. Obviously, like we said in the beginning, these are not guys that we're saying, write it down, guaranteed to be the breakout star of 2024. But they're guys that, hey, we like the talent, and there's enough of a situation there where we could see a path for them having at least a boost in value. And sometimes that's all you need. Hey, a guy that I just acquired for a fifth, I traded for a third. That's you're never going to go broke making a profit, as they say. So those are these little opportunities to just get a little bit better. And every once in a while, you do find an Austin Eckler, an Arian Foster, a Stephon Diggs. Hey, you never know who those guys are going to be. So just give yourselves as many shots as you can at those potentially elite prospects.
Yeah, and I guess to put a bow on it, this is why I always keep a couple of kind of open roster spaces at the bottom of my roster. It's for players like this. And I think that is an important and kind of maybe under talked about aspect of roster building that I think everyone's got to keep in the back of their head. I mean, you can't force it. You can't be cutting guys that you think have value just to make roster spots for these kind of players. But when I'm evaluating my whole roster, I'm always trying to kind of make sure there's a spot, maybe 2 or 3 spots if it's not, if I'm on a little bit of a rebuild or kind of on an upswing for players like this. And I think that is important to kind of at least compute and put into your roster building kind of computations.
Absolutely. So Matt, we're wrapping this one up, but tomorrow's show for us in 5 minutes show, but tomorrow's show is going to be maybe a topic I should have saved for Halloween. But
I was thinking,
yeah, it would have worked. But scary players, and when we say scary, we're not necessarily saying scary, good scary. We're saying scary in the sense of I'm not 100% sold that this guy is going to do what we want them to do this year. Maybe this is a player that we're not projecting injuries, but we're saying there's a world where I could see this guy being a flop or a disappointment for your fantasy football teams in 24. So excited to get into that. Matt, any last thoughts before we get out of here?
No, man. I think, what I said about the roster building stuff was my final thought, so I'm good.
Oh, I gave you an extra final thought to give. All right, so we'll be back tomorrow with those scary players. We will see you then.
Adios.